the um, like the computers freak out just because we're having like a Zoom and we're doing QuickTime and also we coding a bunch of stuff. So I'll double check and make sure everything works properly. And hopefully the computers don't freeze. We'll just trudge on and hope it works. But yeah, like I was saying, this is going to be a continuation of Welcome to the Internet, and where this lecture is going to be focused on rack. If you took a look at the schedule, I split this up into two parts just so that we can have a little bit of break in between. The first part shouldn't be a full hour, even though the lecture time is scheduled for an hour. We'll build a rack app together. And the second part, we'll kind of dive into Sinatra and start introducing how to build a Sinatra app. I think a lot of you have started working on the Sinatra labs. So I feel like most of you are done with the rack portion of the labs. So this might be review. If you have any questions that came up during the labs over there, we can walk through that too. Otherwise, we'll kind of just dive into Sinatra right after. I did put a 15-minute break in between. So I really encourage you to just like shut down your computers, not like shut down, but like turn off the monitor, stretch, walk around so you got that break. And then we'll meet back 15 minutes later just so that you have some kind of break in between before we dive back into Sinatra. Um, Welcome other peeps who are joining us. Usually, what I like to do for the first couple minutes before actually starting is taking a look and giving you all a chance to ask any questions. And this can pertain to stuff from before that you don't understand or weird things that you've seen in lab that are just like, what the heck is going on? I don't know. So I usually like to leave like the first 3 to 5 minutes and just open up the floor to you all. I do have the chat open, so if you're not comfortable like speaking out loud, you can put it in chat. If you're comfortable just like talking to the camera, feel free to talk out loud. So I'm just gonna pause for about 10 seconds and ask any questions about labs that you want to go over or just weird fishy things that you've seen that you don't understand.
In the rack labs for
Okay.
that conditional logic for the pathing,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't my first time running into nested if statements, but it was they were pretty dense and like is it like convention that they're usually like nested like that?
Do you mean like the if else if, or were there
Yeah,
blocks within itself that was
yeah, where
nested?
there's like conditionals within conditionals.
I would I wouldn't assume that it's too conventional. After we build our kind of like simple rack app today, you'll never have to build out something as like meticulous as that. Sinatra and Rails will handle building the routing so that all we need to focus on is the view.
Mhm.
So I will say it's not too conventional. Your routing and resource creation should be simple enough that you're just looking for keywords here and there that will guide you to where you need to go.
Gotcha.
Once we get into Rails, nested routes are very common, but
Hmm.
you will not be writing if else conditionals to handle that. Rails will handle that for you. You'll kind of just automatically nest those resources within each other. So it gets easier. You're kind of just seeing probably a more complex version because everything is just extracted out right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it was really cool. I didn't actually know that you could like I didn't know that you could nest them like that. I had a moment where I was like, wait, I ended up solving it, but I was like, is this the way this should work? And turns out it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, Ruby lets you do anything you want. So you'll see
I
a
have
lot of, especially after graduation, if you ever look at full applications that are built off of Ruby, we kind of just have like a super high level view of what Ruby can do in Mod 1 and even in Mod 2. And then like you go out into the world and you see like crazy things that Ruby just
mhm.
kind of takes it to the next level. So Ruby's awesome. But yeah, you can practically like nest any block you want inside of a Ruby element and it'll be like cool. It's
Cool.
fun.
Quick overview. When your application controller is going to be dictating where the routes lead to, and that'll take you to your views, right?
Yes.
And your application controller needs to inherit either from Sinatra or Rails. Is that right?
For now, I'm just gonna say Sinatra.
Sinatra?
Yeah,
Okay,
just
but that's
focus on
the
Sinatra.
file that needs to inherit things from another class in order to create instances of the page. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah.
So then,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
so then the models don't need to inherit anything. Is that right?
I technically. So we'll kind of hit on this in the next lecture. I usually teach my lectures a little bit ahead of labs, so we'll actually be inheriting from Active Record. So technically, your models will eventually inherit from Active Record, similar to what you did with your Active Record classes in week 3 of Mod 1. Currently, the labs are focusing on teaching you how to set up resources, RESTful convention. So they focus more on just having you create a class from scratch, but it will eventually inherit from Active Record.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Sweet.
I had a question on on the Rack Labs.
Mhm.
So I noticed like it was stuff that we've seen before with the Rack response.new.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering like where exactly is this stuff referring to? Like so
Yeah.
this is a database. But
Well,
is that I noticed I seen those syntax like with database. So.
yeah, we'll go over that. We'll build out a Rack class in a bit, so it should be clear by the end of lecture today where it's coming from.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Sweet. Any other weird, fishy things? It's like going twice, 5, 6 times. I don't know. So I know that a lot of students have already run into version errors, especially since you're going to be working with Active Record. We're going to bring in Sinatra. You're still using a SQLite database. Once you potentially use Postgres, it's going to introduce more problems. I just want to say that running into these errors are common. I can't tell you it's going to get better. You just get better at handling it. Version errors are something that's totally normal. Bundler errors are something that's totally normal. Frameworks update themselves all the time. So I just want you to encourage you to be comfortable solving those issues so that you don't have to feel like you don't have to feel overwhelmed that you can't solve them. Just come and find us. Because it's something that's totally common. We don't expect you to know like how to solve every single error right now. That's something that you get better at over time. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. Since you've probably been introduced to some of them with Active Record, with Sinatra, it gets like a little bit kind of more painful dealing with those errors, and with Rails, it's like a step up. So you'll just be hitting more and more errors. But we have faith by the time you get to Rails, you'll have the tools you need to look up the solutions that you want to also. So just use us for help as you need to. Cool. Let me... How do I exit out this? Okay. Sorry. I'm gonna quit. Okay, cool. So I'm actually gonna start out this lecture by having a breakout session. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start a screen share, and there's a set of requirements that we're going to look at in order to build our React app. So I'm going to share my desktop. If there are no other questions, if there are final questions, feel free to let me know. I think it's this one. Okay, I'm like slowly learning how to use Zoom a little bit better. Typically we have this empty. You'll notice that in your Sinatra application too. You've probably been introduced to the rackup command, which is just something that gets a server running on a port. We can go and view whatever we want on there. And there's also a shotgun. Shotgun is a command that allows us to also run a server, but it's going to automatically refresh and refer to the most live version of your code. Well, it won't automatically refresh, but you'll have to manually refresh the page, and it'll pull the most live code. So you don't have to stop the server running and rerun it every single time you make a change to your code. So we'll be using Shotgun moving forward, and I want you to get comfortable using that. Shotgun specifically looks for this config file. If this file is not called config, it's not going to be able to know which file to run, which controller to reference. And we'll kind of dive deeper into that once we go into Sinatra, but just to give you a heads up, that's why this is called config.ru. And I have this kind of like spec. That kind of gives a description of what our Rack app is going to look for in order to get the services running up on our page. So here it's just like a quick description. This is from an old documentation of GitHub Rack. They kind of updated a bunch of stuff, so it doesn't have this blob, but I really like this blob because it kind of extracts away all the fancy stuff it's doing and just kind of gives us a description of what it's looking for. So I just copy and pasted this from our past lectures. And it just says to use Rack, provide an app and have an object that responds to the call method, taking an environment hash as a parameter. And it returns an array with 3 elements, the response code, the hash of headers, and a response body. And each of this must respond to an each. Now, the breakout room is going to be pretty short, but I want to have us like be engaged a little bit, so I'm going to like figure out how to assign those. And the goal is just with your group, just to walk through what each of these bullet points are asking for, and maybe get an idea of what our application is going to look like. If you've already kind of worked through the labs, you should have an idea of what it's supposed to look like. And I want you to focus on what this is asking for in order to build your Rack class. Any questions? Create breakout rooms. All right, so I'm still getting used to this functionality. If anyone runs into any issues, feel free to let me know. I'm just going to automatically use whatever was assigned to me and put you all in a group. So I'm going to open all the rooms. It'll only go for about like 2 to 3 minutes. I'll bounce in and out here and there. So go ahead and go to your breakout rooms, and then I'll automatically close it in about 3 minutes. Hopefully you all have access to this screen. I'm like trying to see what breakout rooms look like.
Hey, Daria.
Yeah.
So they can't see the breakout room screen, unfortunately.
Dang it.
But they
So
can they get an alert saying join breakout rooms, and then they can choose to join it or ignore it like I did. So
Okay, so they won't see the screens, but they get the...
they do get the alert, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to post it in Slack.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You did it.
Thanks. My laptop is dying. Tank, you are correct. How are you? I miss you, eggs. Okay. Bad decisions. Okay. I forgot I'm still recording. I did figure out that you can trim portions off of your QuickTime video before you upload it.
Like 5 minutes of me like humming to myself. Every video.
Yeah, I've looked it up probably like 5 or 6 times, but I never remember the keyboard shortcut.
I can never get to work. I looked it up a couple times and it just didn't work, whatever I put in, so.
Yeah, it's worked, but it's super painful because you have to like hold on to something and then press it, and that shows an option that lets you pause. And then you have to re-click on it to unpause. It's really weird. So I just end up, like what I probably will do if it's something that completely needs to be edited out is before I upload it, you can see the whole like timeline and trim sections off.
That makes sense. There's probably videos that have passwords of mine on it because I am not a secure person and I leave my passwords on my sticky notes, and then I'm like, oh yeah, and they just come up with my notes and people are like, oh, your password, and I'm like, oh, it'll be fine, it's unlisted. Probably.
Also me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I think it's been like 2 minutes.
Did you set a timer?
I'll set a timer now.
It's okay. I do the same thing. I'm just like, they've been in there for a long time.
1 minute. I'll set a timer. More.
Perfect. You also, when you end the breakout rooms, it gets 60 seconds to come back. So,
Ooh, okay. I'll wait another minute. It's very, very interesting. I miss lecturing in person. So much easier.
yeah, it's going to be interesting when we go back because I'm going to have to relearn how to lecture in person because I've like become so accustomed to lecturing online.
Yeah, it'll be relearning.
Mm-hmm.
Unlearning and relearning.
Mm-hmm.
Woo. I'm sorry to like spam you with so many questions on Slack.
No, it made sense. Yeah. Yeah, like I'll try to, did you talk to that Mod 5 student already?
Mm-mm. I'm checking in with her this afternoon.
I am checking in with the 3 repeats at 3-ish. One is going to Mod 1, the other one will be going to Mod 3. So maybe at some point I'll introduce you to JC, because you're doing Mod 1 next time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. JC. Okay.
JC.
About to close rooms. I tried to do a live share and Greg said it was killing his computer. So I was like, okay, we'll just not for this time.
I've never tried the live shares.
It works. It's a little confusing, but it's worked between Greg and me because he set up live share on his computer. So all the students might have to set it up. Oh, Greg, you're right there. Just saw you. Hello. All right, I'm closing the rooms out.
We're back.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Does it just automatically kick you out?
Yeah, I was like, I know I'm talking to no one.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, there should be a way to gracefully exit.
If you're paying attention.
Yeah, I'm getting used to this still. So
if you're paying attention, it gives you a countdown. But if you're just talking,
okay, well, next time I will message you all, wait 30 seconds, and then close it.
What was that, John?
Oh, did someone say something?
It's closed. But it says the response body which must respond to each. And the examples that we found in the labs, like it was just one element inside of the array. I was just curious if there were any times where there would be multiple elements and why we would need to iterate over it with each.
Oops. Can I like go to X? No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hi.
Did you get that, Olsen Daria?
Sorry. This Zoom chat. My apologies, Josh. Okay. So any instances where you'll have to pass in multiple responses from the body? Was that the question?
But yeah, so like that last one, which must respond to each. All the examples in the labs just have one element inside of the array. So like one set of HTML, that sort of thing. So when would we need to have multiple items in that array?
Technically, when you for the I think for the body, since everything nested inside of it are just going to be a bunch of element tags, initially there is only going to be one tag rendered. So there might not really be a case where you're passing in multiple elements. If you are, technically, like as you'll see here in our array, you can pass in multiple elements as long as you're hard coding it. So it'll still be able to process it and render it onto the page. So we'll kind of take a look at that. I would say typically it is just going to be one element that's all wrapped in a body tag.
Okay.
I tried to like take out the. Okay.
I guess I'm not seeing private messages. If you think they're showing, I'm not seeing any.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can't see anything.
I'm sorry, y'all.
No, it's great.
Okay, well that's good to know from my end. Okay, so this Zoom chat that I'm seeing here is just like on my end. Okay, well that makes me feel a little better. Okay, so you kind of got a chance to talk about these things and what we're looking for. That was a really good question. if you still have questions on it after, sync in with me and we can kind of elaborate more. And code this out after giving you a chance to kind of discuss what it's supposed to look like. And I do, like, usually I get input from students, but since you got a chance to talk about it, I'm gonna go ahead and code it out. And if you have any questions that you have, feel free to chime in and we can talk about it. I'm gonna open up the chat first, and then I'm gonna hide this. Hide loading me controls, cool. And let's go from here. So inside of this config.ru, we're just gonna take a look at these requirements and build it out step by step. And I'll go ahead and use this class and we'll run it and we'll build out this random app together just to kind of explore how these resources are read and how it's rendered onto the page. If you have any specific questions, I do have the chat open, so you can ask it in chat or you can speak to me and it'll show me, or I'll be able to hear you. So the first part that we kind of digested is we're supposed to have some kind of class called app. Technically, it doesn't really tell us that it's supposed to be a class. However, it does say it's an object that responds, or it's an object that's being rendered as our rack app. So that's kind of an indication that this needs to be a class, and we're going to call it app. See a private message. Cool. And real quick, and you can put it in, just like respond to me in the chat to like utilize this. It says that I'm going to have an object that responds to the call method. So real quick, what kind of method is this supposed to be? We know it's going to be call. And revisiting like mod 1, it could be an instance method, a class method. I'm trying to remember anything else that was there, but I think those are the two options. So is this going to be an instance method or a class method? Everyone.
It's an instance method?
Instance method, yeah. And there were a couple of people who responded too, thank you. I'm just realizing like everyone else isn't seeing this, so it's probably different from your end, but it's cool. Yeah, this is going to be an instance method because it's going to respond to the specific object that we create. And it's going to be called call, and it says that it takes in an environment hash as a parameter. So we're going to say environment hash. And I'm instantly going to put a binding.pry in here. So we can kind of see what happens as soon as we get this app running. Now, you'll notice like moving forward from Rack to Sinatra to Rails, there's going to be a ton of errors that pop up. I will intentionally hit all the errors that you'll ever see so you can get comfortable with it and we can solve it together, because you'll definitely hit these, and you probably hit these while you've been working on labs. So let's see what happens if I open this up. Let me move this stuff over. Hide. Floating media clicks. Okay. So I'm gonna go to part on the rack, and I'm gonna do shotgun. So shotgun is going to look for my config.ru rackup file, and it's going to look at the contents inside of it and figure out what port to run it on. Now instantly you can see that it ran off of this address here, so I can copy and paste this if I want to. This is local to my computer, so you can also use localhost instead to get to this port. 9393 is the actual port that Sinatra is going to run this off of. So copy paste. We got to 9393 and we get this error that's like, hey, you're missing a run statement. So we have this code written, but we actually haven't called it. We haven't instantiated any instance of this, so nothing's actually running. So we can say run app.new. Right now we don't have it initialized, so it's not really taking in any parameters. We can just say app.new and let's go ahead and refresh. Cool. Oh dang it, require pry. I still forget this every time. You'd think I learned after like a year. Okay, so right now we hit refresh, and here you're gonna see this, like, I call it infinite loop, but there's no technical term for it. But it's kind of just paused in a sense, and you just get this like forever running circle here. This is an indication that you've hit a pry session. It might be a little bit harder to tell from before when you were running your Ruby program. You can iteratively see where the program stops. In this case, since you're looking at it from the browser, you'll have to go to the console to actually see where it stops. So if we take a look here, we're in our call method, we created our instance of app, and we've hit our pry session on line 13. So the actually executing and using pry inside of our app is going to be exactly the same as we did in mod 1. It's just going to be a little bit different because we have our HTML file that we're looking at in order to actually see what happens. Just to give you a heads up on that. Now, I didn't write anything. All we did was create our app instance and use Shotgun to run this app. But I get access to this whole thing inside of environment hash. This is a condensed version of what Rack provides us. You can technically see all of this from the inspect tool if you want to. But this is just to give you an idea of the actual parameters that are passed into this call method that we can use to do whatever we want when we're creating our resources and when we're directing the user where to go from this page. And there's a ton of stuff in here. Oh, did someone say something?
No, I was sorry.
Okay, cool. Now you can see like this is just a hash of a ton of stuff in here. And in JavaScript, we call hashes objects. So since I'm coming back from JavaScript land, I might use them interchangeably. So if I accidentally say object and we're looking at a hash, that's what I mean. Hash objects, I use them interchangeably. The important part here is this request path. And there's also an actual path in here somewhere. Path info, which is like the same thing, request URI. All of these point to the same value, which is just the single slash. And the single slash just indicates to us that it's the root. Typically, if you have a home page or a landing page, or you don't give it any resource at all, it's just going to be known as the root path, which is what this is indicated here. So far, if we kind of review what we did this morning, I've sent a GET request because I just pressed enter at this link here. And this is the path that's available to me. This is the resource. Now, if we want to get access to this, since this is a hash, I could do something like request path. I think path info because it's least amount of letters. I can say path info and I get access to this thing. So I can actually use this inside of my program. Let me click exit. Right now it's going to be like, this is actually a very fun, not fun error, but interesting error, because anytime your web page isn't able to process the value that it gets as an object, it's going to give us an error. And in this case, Ruby automatically returned nothing. So it's like, hey, you're supposed to give me an error with an array with some stuff in there, and you gave me nothing. So you get this, I got nil and not an array as an object inside of here. Cool. That was mainly to just show you what's available to us without even writing any code. Those are all the information that Rack was able to get to us from running our server on that specific port, and these are all the environment variables that are automatically configured to the page that we're looking at. And we have access to this using environment hash. We can get the path info. So let's see. Let's actually take a look at what these elements are here. So we created our call method. We took in an environment hash. And now this is where it says, I want an array with 3 elements inside of it. So it's going to have 3 elements inside of here. It's going to have some kind of HTTP code. Dang it, typing. My computer is getting slower, but that's okay. We're going to get headers and then a body. Now, the most common HTTP code that we're going to get is going to be 200. So I'll have that be 200. And it does say headers needs to be a hash. So we can go ahead and make that a hash. And for our body or for our header so far, when we're just building out this site, the only thing we need to indicate is that the code that's going to go, or the string that's going to be rendered onto the page is HTML. So we just need to do content type. And we'll say text HTML. You can give other stuff inside of here. For now, I'm just going to leave it like that. And then we can say body. And this is where you can say hello 030920. I think that's the date. I don't know if you guys or if you all have selected a cohort name. So I'm gonna call you by your class name. I do have a question here. If we're running rack on a remote machine, are those hash elements describing the remote server or my browser making the request? So in this case, it's going to represent your remote server because your browser is going to vary depending on what port you're going to be running from. It's a little bit harder to see for our apps right now because our client and our server runs on the same port. So our client and server port is always going to be the same. And this is going to be the same up until the end of mod 2. So you can think of it as our client and server are on the same port, so you'll never have to worry about outside clients accessing your data, accessing your information. We will kind of visit how we can get different ports, in a sense, to talk to each other after this mod. Hopefully that answers the question. Cool. So we're in our pry again, so I should probably take out this pry so we don't end up in an infinite pry loop. Take out this pry. Cool. So this is, in essence, all our rack app needs. We got our hello 03920. If we inspect this, you'll notice we didn't actually format the HTML document that's going to be rendered on this page, but Rack was able to take care of that based on the headers and the parameters that we gave it. We didn't give it any scripts, so it's not going to run any scripts. We didn't give it any CSS document, it's not going to run anything there. But the body has this one tag. This is the default tag. You don't have to worry too much about that for now. But there's this tag that's provided to the string that we created, and it gets rendered onto the page. So this kind of just gives an example of what Rack is looking for in order to give us the page. And all we've done so far is created our elements, and we've used environment hash. Well, we haven't used it yet, but we formatted everything we need inside of this array because of implicit return. It took that object and that array and it rendered it onto our page. Cool. Any questions on what we've done so far? I'll pause for a couple seconds.
I think I had a question on the question and then the answer.
Okay.
So it's asking. I'm not sure exactly what it's asking. So is it asking? I see that you entered stuff into an array, into the elements of the array. Is it asking for us to return specific information or yeah, I'm not sure.
Are you talking about
asking?
Rack? Is Rack it?
So it says a return an array with 3 elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and then I see in your array you have 3 elements. HTTP. Is that stuff that you just entered, or is it does it just go through the internet file and then find those 3 pieces of information?
This is stuff that I entered. So we created this HTTP code. We hard-coded everything right now.
Okay.
We hard-coded the header, we hard-coded the code, and we hard-coded the body.
Okay.
This Rack used this data to create our HTML document. When we said run app.new, it took this return value because all we did was give it these 3 parameters.
Okay.
It automatically ran app.call because Rack is doing that on the back end. It's configuring all of that information, and it puts it out to the server.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Cool.
So whenever you're putting something to the server, it needs to be in this mode of just HTTP response code, hash of headers, and then response body.
Yep. Every single HTML page that gets rendered, it doesn't even matter if it's Rack, it doesn't matter what kind of server you're running. It has a header, it has a head, it has a body, and it has some other stuff, but it has a status code associated with it. It was the exact same thing when we looked at our GitHub page this morning, even though we didn't write the GitHub page. They had a status code 200 to indicate that everything was successful. We got code back. They had a header with their own macros associated with it, and they had their own body, which was just the result that actually got returned to us from the live GitHub server that they went and accessed to give us the data. In our case, it's just we're building our own server, so this is what we have so far right now.
Makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this technically works, it's fine. However, it gets super painful if I have to say environment.hash. So what I can actually do here, this is where we kind of dig into resources and how we are going to use those resources to figure out what to show on the page and what to render on the page. So something I can do before I return any of this is I can say if environment hash of path info equals this, so that's the root path that we're looking at. We can say body equals welcome to Flatiron School. Cool. Sure. And then let's say else. Let's create another one. And then you can tell this is already fun and painful because I have to copy this over again. Let me hide this again. Copy, paste. This is intentionally painful right now, so bear with me for a little bit. Else body equals no page yet. Eventually we'll have one. Cool. So not doing anything too fancy here or too like exciting, where all we have is something that says welcome to Flatiron School and everything else is just going to say there's no page for that yet. Now we're replacing the body string. So we are actually taking this and it's getting replaced with the new array that we create. So by the time we get here, we have that new information. So now if I refresh this page, maybe. Do I have a leftover pry? Nope. It's just, okay, cool. So we're in our home page. We saw welcome to Flatiron School, which is what we would expect to see from this portion here, welcome to Flatiron School. So this is what I want you to take away, in a sense, from this lecture at least, is how Rack is using those resources to process what to render and where to go. So I took a look at this root path. It said, all right, this is the path, this is the body that I'm setting. So if I say, oh, I made this root. Let's call this something like super random, like banana. Or technically it could be anything, but I could say banana. It doesn't really matter what I call this. And now it's gonna match up this resource that we gave it with banana, and it's gonna take us to this page here. Is that else if statement the same as an else? Yes. Yes, it is. You are correct. I'm just not, I'm just showing you like different paths you can create. Technically the last thing this page we have here should be an else. Cool. So I can say / banana, and it would make more sense for me to have else if welcome to the page for banana, and this will be like an else. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me move this up. So yeah, so else if I go to the page for banana, it's going to say welcome to the page for banana, else it's going to say we don't have a page for that yet. So now we're kind of controlling which path should take us to which location inside of our site. So this is how resources that we define is working. Our Rack app is looking for that specific resource and guiding what to render on the page. But however, like right now, all of this is still very hard-coded, which isn't going to be super useful if we actually want to build an app. We want to do things more dynamically as our user provides us that information. And this is where Rack provides us some tools that we can use so that we can make the process of rendering stuff onto the page, taking in information, sending requests back and forth a little bit easier. So if we go into, let me put that pry back. And I'm going to go ahead and go here. I'm going to refresh. And I hit refresh. I put that pry back in here, so nothing's happening. There's this pause. So let's go ahead and go back to here. Okay. Thought I would have hit the pry. Okay, so we're in our pry, line 13. None of this code has run yet. And this is where our Rack objects come in. We have the Rack gem required inside of our project. So we can say Rack dot request new, and we pass in this environment hash. So we're taking this environment hash and we're creating a new object of request. And someone had a question of what this : request.new is doing. Rack is a module that we're using inside of this project, and that comes from the Rack gem. And this module has a bunch of different classes that we can use inside of it, and request is just one of those classes. So we're creating a new object, a request object, and we're passing in this environment hash that was automatically configured to the specific app when we ran it on our server. So if I click enter, what did I call? Environment.
Your environment hash is a typo.
Yeah, if you have not noticed, I'm very bad at spelling. So everything looks exactly the same, except now it's a Rack object. You see this hashtag angle brackets around it. And I have this env method that's associated with this whole thing. And the only way that I'm really going to use it for now is I now have the ability, well, I guess I could save this to an request object. So I'm going to say request equals. So now I have access to this object that I created. And I can say request.path. Now I don't have to worry about looking for the key. I don't have to worry about modifying anything inside of this method. All I need to say is request.path, and I get access to the resource that I want, and I can use that to figure out where I should go and what I should give back to the user. So I am going to copy this. Now this is how you want to format your request. You don't want to look for the keys. You're probably familiar with using this inside of your Rack labs because that's what they walk you through. So this is the convention that you want to use. As soon as you go inside of your Rack app, you're going to pass in the environment hash, and you're going to create a new request object and store that in request. Now the next part, we kind of took care of how to handle this environment hash path info thing. So now rather than saying request, let me like Command D out of this. Command D. Okay, so I can say request.path. And it's gonna look for request.path, whether it's root, banana, it's fine. So now I can directly access the path from here in this request object that I created. And we can make this process more efficient rather than having to overwrite body, create these headers. Let's actually go into our pry. And the second object that we can use to kind of see how Rack is outputting this information is our response object. So I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to say response, go down, equals, and it still comes from our Rack module, and we'll say response.new. We don't need to pass anything. You can. For now, I just want to say response.new so that we can see what it creates for us. We have this Rack object that's been created for us, and it has a bunch of different elements inside of it. Things that you should be familiar with: there's a status that's automatically set as a variable inside of this object. There's a body that's automatically set. There's a header that's initially empty, which is fine for now. This block stuff, technically you can pass in any operation or block inside of this response object, and Rack will handle it for us. For now, all we really need to care about is the stuff that we're familiar with: the body, header, status, length it'll use for its own purposes. And we have this one method that's available to us, which allows us to use the write method. So rather than having an array that we have to overwrite or append to each time, we can just use this write method from our response object in Rack and go ahead and use that to write stuff to the page. So typically what you're going to do is you're going to create your response object, and you're going to use that response object to write data to the screen. And that's probably what you're familiar with using so far in your labs, because that's what the labs potentially walk you through. So that's the second part. Let me go ahead and copy and paste it. The flow that I typically like to do for testing things in a sense, if it'll let me copy that, is to make sure things are working in pry and then copy paste that over. So you know that you have working code by the time you make it to this code here. So we created our request object. We're going to create our response object, and we're going to use this response to write stuff to the page. So we can technically comment this out. And instead of body equals, we'll say response dot write. And this ends up being a method that takes in the string. So it's going to take in the string that we passed in, and it's going to write it to the body object that we want. And if you want to like see it in action, I can say response.write hi, and it returns the string that it wrote. However, if I check out response again, I now have hi inside of my body that I automatically attached to this, and it's keeping track of other stuff like the status, the length of the string that I passed through, and it does all this stuff for me, which is awesome. So this is what the write method is doing when you're using it with your response object that you create. And let me finally comment this out. So if I comment this out and I run this, let me take out my pry, check our final stuff here, exit, cool, refresh. I'm in Banana right now, but that's okay. I can go to Banana, I can go to the root page. Let me see this. This is being slow. Cool. It's erroring out here. Why is it not erroring out here? Oh, it's just slow. Okay. Cool. So you're gonna see this error when your Rack app can't process what you're sending it and render it onto the page. In this case, it's like, hey, you gave me welcome to Flatiron School, which isn't an array, but it's a string, and that's coming from the implicit return that we have created from our if statement here. So this is the return object. And as you saw when we ran this in our terminal, up here, our write object just returns to us the information or the string that we actually want to attach to the body, which isn't what our response is expecting or our Rack app is expecting. It's expecting the full object that needs to be rendered onto the page. So there's one final step that you need to do in order to actually wrap all of this and create the object that Rack is expecting. You do this response.finish. And what this does is it says, okay, I have all of the bodies good to go, the headers are good to go, the code is set, you have the information that you need, go ahead and send it. So this is kind of like our return. This replaces this line here. And then refresh, and it should go through. So this is kind of just an introduction to what Rack is actually doing. If you take a look at a high level of what this app is doing, it should, in a bit when we build out our Sinatra app, we're going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to add in some convention, and rather than just putting a string onto the page, we're actually going to render HTML documents. And it says like banana here, let's see. So rather than saying banana, one final thing, you probably want to call this like something else, like input, and we can interpolate that here for now. This ends up being our else, which is fine. I will like show you what this does real quick, because you do want to be familiar with the syntax. This is known as a dynamic parameter inside of our project, I guess. So this allows us to create a hash or a key value pair based on this key value that we're giving it. So we're going to say anything that comes after the first slash, go ahead and call it input, and we're just interpolating that in the output that we give it. So right now, if I refresh this, well, let me go to path. Let me say sample. So if I say sample, what it should ideally do, I'll just keep on talking until it loads, is it's going to take in sample as a parameter from that resource and render it onto the page. It's doing not yet, eventually. Colon input. I'll have to see why it's not. Loading up. Yeah, it's defaulting to the edge case. Although it should be processing. Let me try this. I'll try this. If this doesn't work, I'll debug it and update you all on why it wasn't going through.
I had a quick question
Okay.
on.
I'm on.
Oh, yep. You sure?
Yeah, go
Okay,
for it.
cool. Which we call it. So, whenever you like actually went to the server website, you were typing. I think I missed the part. Were you typing like a series of numbers? Or,
You can't just do 9393.
okay.
Need the HTTP. We'll see.
Yep.
But what you're probably more used to seeing is the localhost, which means the same thing.
Okay.
One's just the IP address local to your computer for that specific port, and it's just interchangeable.
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. Sweet.
Response.write
Yeah.
underneath it, would that show up as two elements in that array?
Let's check it
Or would that
out.
still be considered one single element?
My initial response is that it'll be considered one element. But we'll see.
So that means if we were to write a full HTML file, it
Mhm.
would also be considered one element.
If you wrote a full so technically there will be multiple elements on the page. What you'll see with our Sinatra app, we're never just going to render plain text onto the page. It's always going to be wrapped in some kind of tag, probably just like a divider tag, so we can at least separate the elements that we want to. So see here, it's using this like pre-tag that's just by default from Rack. But when we create our elements, they're going to be separated out properly so that it can actually be rendered correctly.
Oh, so then the HTML tags are going to help determine what the elements are within that array?
Yep. What you actually want to do is wrap your components into separate dividers or div tags so that your code stays more organized. Once you start applying CSS and actually styling your elements properly, you'll kind of be forced to organize your stuff a little bit better. You can definitely have everything under a body tag and it'll be fine. However, it'll be very painful to edit stuff later. So right now it just kind of appended all the strings to inside of our pre-tag because we haven't given it any tags for HTML to render.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And then quick question on that colon index.
Yeah.
So the colon is going to allow whatever is inputted after the dash as a key.
Yep. So,
And yeah, could you elaborate on that part?
yeah,
a
so
little bit?
this will create an object so that it'll take whatever is after this as input. So right now our input is, I'm forgetting like exact syntax because it's not going through, but that's fine. So it's going to take sample and it's going to put it as a value for input. So
in URL, you don't have to type in --input.
I do in Sinatra, and I feel like it should be similar in React, but just the fact that it's not 100% going through means something I'm missing syntactically, which I can look up. Which I could also do here, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is gonna give me so many results. Yeah, any other final questions? Where did
Yeah,
they
I'm
come
not
from?
sure if you covered it. So whenever you call write, what is that? What property is that writing to in the
Yeah.
response? Is that, can we examine, like whenever you say, response.write,
Mhm.
is that like just appending on to the body, or is it?
Yep. So right here, our write
Oh, okay.
is
Okay.
storing it in the body.
Gotcha.
So every single time we do response.write, it attaches a new string or whatever element we create
Gotcha.
to the body.
Okay,
So
I
you can
missed
kind of
that. Thanks.
think of it as nesting it in our body tags. for our page.
Okay.
Where did they come from? It's magical. You can tell like a Flatiron student wrote this. Sorry. I just wanna. Yeah, they're showing us Sinatra. I'll look up specific syntax. It should be the same for rack, but it's not going through. So I'll double check
Can
on
I
that.
see the code again?
Yeah. I think.
Do you only
Oh.
run shotguns? Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I think don't we have to put for next to that else if request.path.match for that to work?
Dot match. Dot match is another way to look for the exact string. Maybe. Yeah, I'll try it with match. I feel like the comparison should still go through because I just want my dynamic parameter to go through, but it's all right. Yeah. But I just want you to know if you put a colon before the actual parameter you want to process, it makes it dynamic. So it'll take the input that the user gave, it'll assign a key value pair based on the value. So the key will be called input and the value will be called sample. And we'll go through this in our Sinatra app too. Cool. All right, more questions?
Where do we find the sample value?
The sample value will be given to us from our path. So if let me go here. Let me put that pry again. And let me refresh. I should probably look at, yeah, the proper way to debug this is put this bybug and debug. All right. So if I do request.path response. What did I call this? Oh, I put my pry before. When you're debugging stuff, lesson, always put the pry after the variables declared. Request.path. Okay, so this sample is the value that comes through. I'd have to look at or think about how we can have that be passed in as input and use that dynamically. But this is what we can refer to as input from our path. Okay, yeah, it's possible. Oh wait, what the fuck? Weird. Let me exit out of my pry. Okay, so I'll do school / sample enter. Should hit my pry again. Okay. And I'll run this again. And request.path. School sample. Exit. No. Yeah. I'm forgetting something syntactically, but it's cool. Cool. Alright. Final questions. Cool. So just giving an intro of what Rack is doing for us when it's running our server and how that configuration process is going. Sinatra is going to do the exact same thing, except we will never have to worry about formatting our request and response objects once we go into Sinatra and Rails. That's automatically going to happen when we inherit our classes from Sinatra. It's going to take care of all of that stuff, and all we have to focus on is figuring out the type of request, where it should go, type of request, what the resource is, and what should be displayed when a user goes to that page, which is the exact same thing we did here, but it'll be much more seamless and less painful, as you saw here. Cool. So I'm going to wrap up the first portion of the Rack intro right now, and then we'll meet back at 2:45. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break, just stretch, chill for a little bit. Just the way that the Google Calendar event was created, there is a new Zoom link that we'll go to, and then we'll just upload a new recording from there. Sweet. Thank you all. I will see you in about 10 minutes. Get some
Thank you.
rest. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay. Stop sharing. All right. Let me stop recording.